Hey everybody, Colin Pugh here. This is the very first vlog and podcast, or more like a preview of a podcast, of the Undetermined States of America, or USA for short. So we have about 50 subscribers so far. Thank you for signing up. I'm glad you are part of this journey together as fellow founding citizens. So the first post was put out about 3 weeks ago on MLK/Inauguration Day. And the inspiration for USA, I also just wanted to articulate verbally, because I am a man of verbal articulations, as many of my friends will attest to. So I wanted to just share a bit more about the vision and build off the very first post. So the whole idea behind Undetermined States of America is that right now the United States of America feels anything but united. It's my belief that one of the main reasons it does not feel united is because we don't have faith in our actual system of government and how our country is being run. And we don't feel united because we don't believe in the current implementation of our deepest core values as Americans. And what do I mean by the implementation of our deepest core values? I do believe that the Declaration of Independence, which is what we celebrate every 4th of July when we celebrate our independence from Britain, is where we articulated in 1776 our deepest core values. And that is everyone is created equal and has the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And another feature of the Declaration of Independence is that it states, and I will read here, that whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or abolish it, and to institute new government, laying its foundation on such principles and organizing its powers in such form as to them shall seem most likely to affect their safety and happiness. That is in the Declaration of Independence. There is also a clause in the Constitution. I can't find it now. I should have had that pulled up here, but that states that, I think it's Amendment 9, that we do have the right to modify the Constitution and change it if it's no longer serving the people. And why I think our country feels so chaotic right now, I mean, there's many practical reasons, but I think foundationally we're going through a crisis of faith and identity in what is America all about. What is the vision and project of the United States of America? We are a very special, unique country, and I know that might rouse some people up because that alludes to, American exceptionalism and imperialism and just running amok all over the world. And I am involving ourselves in too many other countries' developments and plans in illegal and inhumane ways. I don't mean special in the American exceptionalism sense, but unique in that it's one of the few, if not only, countries that is founded on an ideal, on a vision, rather than an ethnic or cultural identity. And that ideal or vision is that we are a people who are meant to be pioneers and visionaries of democracy. And that is what we learn as kids in our school, an American education system, that the founding fathers came up with a system that synthesized the best thinking of the time on what sort of system of government is most likely to further those three ends: life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Granted, it was for a very limited number of people, aka usually white male slave owning men, and we needed to evolve and grow past that, and we still are doing that. But I think in 2025 and beyond, we're meant to have not just founding fathers, but founding mothers, founding people of color, founding working class people, founding people without many access to resources and funds, artists, community leaders, organizers. We need to actually do what we did again, because I think the ideal we are founded on is, as pioneers of democracy, we need to undertake a risky journey to actually rebuild and re-envision our government and our country and how we want it to look. That is, to me, what it means to be an American. It's not about your skin color, your sexual orientation, your economic class. It is about your willingness to see the divine spark within you and within your fellow citizens, and respect them as they go about their way of pursuing the good life. And the challenge, the unique challenge of the American project, is we need to come up with a system of government that furthers the common good with all these different worldviews or religious views, spiritual views, ways of life, etc. And that is what is cool and exciting about Americans, I think, that we have this task ahead of us. And I think, like I'm saying here, the chaos we feel is because we have a really big task ahead of us. All this petty culture wars and infighting and things like that. It doesn't mean that there's not real issues and differences. There are. But there are core similarities that I think most Americans believe in that we are not leveraging or activating to unite ourselves to feel in unison around a vision for our country and a system of government that aligns with that vision. So the Declaration of Independence, I think we probably need a new one in a way, because if you can, how I think of it, and I think how historians have thought of it, the Declaration of Independence is kind of our core values, our vision of what it means to be an American and for America. And the Constitution is an instantiation, is an implementation of those values. But these were written 250 years ago. I say in the first blog post, we're running Windows 1776. I'm actually going to change that to we're running Windows 1787 when the Constitution was formed, because what we have been doing is just using this old, outdated system that needs an update. And we need to refer back to, well, what are the core values that we're seeking to build a system around? And what is so exciting and dangerous is that I think Americans need to re-articulate to each other, what is the Declaration of Independence mean now? What do we want to be independent from? In the time of the American Revolution, it was independence from kings and an empire. But now, as we're seeing, we also need freedom from private empires. The large companies like Tesla, Apple, Amazon, Microsoft, etc., I don't think they are inherently evil. I think it's when power structures evolved so much that it coagulated into highly concentrated forms of power that our system of government was simply not able to foresee running our democracy into the ground. So the founding fathers wanted freedom from monarch tyranny, like traditional tyranny or unrepresentation. But I don't think they foresaw the kind of tyranny that comes from an oligarchy or aristocracy or plutocracy. Granted, there were very undemocratic ideals baked into the Constitution, which we will explore in depth throughout this blog and podcast through Undetermined States of America, because we do have a faith in the Constitution that is creedal that actually needs to be examined. There were explicit ways that it was put in, explicit undemocratic ways and put into our Constitution. I mean, people say it's not technically a democracy, it's a republic. Like, it's supposed to represent the public. But as we see, most Americans know and feel the system is completely overtaken by private interests and power and money. It's not ran by and for the people. And, you know, there might have been a time where there was a healthy equilibrium between powerful interests and people being able to live a dignified life, probably shortly after World War II, and then maybe another boom in the 80s or so. But the free market, I think, has completely run amok, and now we're facing both governmental tyranny to a degree, but I think even more so private tyranny, just large private individuals and organizations that have vastly far too much sway to allow our government to function smoothly. And what we need to do is, our common task is we know this system is corrupted and outdated like an old computer is corrupt or outdated. When you know something is outdated, what you need is a canvas to envision the next version of that. And that is what Undetermined States of America is meant to be, is a canvas for a vision for the future of our country. We completely lack vision. We're just maintaining a legacy system that no longer serves the people. And citizens on the left and the right agree with that. I think the statistic is 86% of people, whether they were Republican or Democrat, feel that private interests and money has far too much influence in our politics. And that's true. And one of the core reasons I believe, and I want to explore this through this platform as well as through conversations both with you, the founding citizens, as well as experts, is that electoral democracy is one of the core problems of what makes this system outdated. In other words, we have conflated elections and democracy with being synonyms. And that needs to be challenged. And one of the most fruitful ways to explore an alternative that has picked up a lot of steam in through community organizers and different sectors of the political science academy, I would say, is what is called deliberative democracy. Deliberative democracy starts with the word deliberative, which comes from deliberate, where you're actually deliberating, conversing, picking apart the challenges that need to be solved with your fellow citizens. You are deliberating and arguing in a respectful manner on what needs to actually be done. We sometimes think of that our Congress people are deliberating, even though we elect them, we hope or we think that they're looking at the problems facing their constituents and facing our nation, and they are thinking deeply about policy and laws and programs to come up with to actually face those problems. But that is not what actually happens. Most of the time, Congress people, both senators and people in the House, spend their time fundraising and not actually learning or working on the issues. So electoral democracy is an outdated way to actually run a democratic institution. And Aristotle has a quote that goes, if you want oligarchy use elections, but if you want true democracy, do it by lot or sortition. In other words, by lot is random selection, like actually have citizens randomly selected to deliberate on the policies and the issues that are affecting them as citizens. And what this requires is a level of faith in our fellow citizens that the powers that be purposefully try to fray and exploit. Like they want us to be divided. They want us to remember the most uncharitable articulations of the differences we might have, for example, around abortion or trans rights or immigration. They try to actively inflame those tensions, which there are differences around on the political, religious spectrum, to make us feel like we can't compromise or come to the table or we cannot work towards the common good. And what they have no interest in doing, and when I say they, I just mean the current system. There are some nefarious actors, I'm sure, like the Bob Mendeses of the world, New Jersey senators putting gold bars in bags with a dollar sign on it and driving off of their Mercedes to get kebabs on a discount or something like that. There are bad faith actors, but what it really is just a system that feeds off divisiveness. That's why the name of our country, United States of America, we know in our hearts that doesn't feel to be the case. We know we aren't united. And the question is, how can we actually unite? And I think it's by challenging, well, what does it actually mean to be a democracy? And electoral democracy is outdated. It's too easily captured by special interests. And in ancient Greece, they used randomly selected citizens to deliberate on the issues. I'm actually reading this book now by Alex Guerrero called Autocracy. He is a philosophy professor at Rutgers. I first read about this idea about 10 years ago, 11 years ago, 2014, in an Aeon article. And when I read about it, to articulate the idea, it's basically the idea that we should have randomly selected citizens, like picked through a lottery, hence the name autocracy, that run on single issue legislators. For instance, 300 randomly selected citizens are on a 3-year legislator for education or agriculture or healthcare, and they get compensated really well, like $100,000 a year, and they're given the resources and the time and the space to talk to experts, to talk to members of the community who it would affect, and to deliberate amongst themselves. And there would even be like moderators and people to help them work out challenges and conflicts. And even if you aren't inspired by that idea or think it would work, to me it's such a refreshing breath of fresh air for dusting off our old versions of like thinking elections are democracy. Like there is a sense that elections are representative and they add a form of political legitimacy, because the idea is that citizens get to consent and pick who is governing them. But we all know that elections are a horse and pony show, whatever, dog and pony show, and they're too easily captured and determined by money, by private corporate, usually interest or oligarchic individuals who do not have the common good in mind, but they have their own private interests in mind. And I think Americans know in their hearts that this is not how it's supposed to be. So I will say that a big inspiration for Undetermined States of America was ideas like autocracy, because I realized we just don't have a venue as citizens, as Americans, to just like dream or to envision or to talk about ideas like this. Like, even if you disagree, it just with autocracy or don't think it would work, it's just such a refreshing take on what democratic governance should look like. And there's just so many other ideas out there that inspire me that I realize there's just no canvas or platform to envision these. Another example of an idea I've been inspired by is called mutualism. And it has its roots back in the 1800s, I think, from the anarchist tradition. And a book written by this woman, Sarah Horowitz, who I've had the pleasure of meeting, called Mutualism, outlines how we need a third sector of our economy. We have the public sector, like, government agencies, and the private sector, like nonprofits, for-profit companies. But then there's a mutualist sector, which is cooperatives, labor unions, mutual aid societies, and religious faith groups. And these are companies or organizations that are based on community. They're community-based enterprises where they still have a financial mechanism to make funds, but their focus is more so on the community and supporting each other. And she actually traces the history of mutualist movements in the U.S. in her book, Mutualism, which I highly recommend. And she gives an example of the Great Depression. And during the Great Depression, American citizens, they weren't getting help from the government, and they weren't getting help from private interests. So they had to band together, and they formed mutual aid networks to support each other. And what Sarah articulates in her book, Mutualism, is that where the progressives went wrong is that after the New Deal was passed, they saw the government as the main tool to affect change, when in fact it was actually the mutual care and concern and mutual aid groups that formed that was leading to change being made, to actually providing that social safety net. And so she argues for we need a 3-lane highway of our government, of our economy. That's the public sector, the private sector, and the mutual sector for community-based organizations. And I just love that idea. I'm so inspired by it. For example, imagine if we had some program in our government or funded in the U.S. where mom and pop shops would get funding or support to compete with Amazon. Either like we subsidize corn and sugar. What if we help subsidize small town businesses? I'm sure we already have programs that do, but just think of the benefits of someone owning their own business, co-owning it as a cooperative, for instance, and having local community relationships being enhanced by that. And even if it needs some support from the government at first to get off its feet, we can create this healthy 3-lane highway with a mutualist sector. Sarah argues in her book, I believe, that the mutualist sector is right now just like a sideline on the highway, just off to the side. It needs to actually be one of the main routes of the whole system. And that's just inspiring to me, because like, what if we had a community-based economy that was more focused on relationships and flourishing than just profits? Like, these companies would still need to make profit to run and have a financial mechanism, but people in general, I think, are mostly satisfied when they have a decent income, dignified work, and they can support their family in a meaningful way. Most people don't want to make ogles or crazy sums of money. Oogles, I'm not sure of the word I'm trying to say here. Most people don't want that. I don't think. Like, the system rewards greed. Greed is a vice, and when people are greedy, they're not happy. I think that's why in the Bible it says it's easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than for a rich person to enter the kingdom of heaven. I don't think having wealth is inherently evil or wrong, but what is very likely, I think, with high amounts of wealth is that it makes one potentially greedy, and it makes you see other people as lesser than. You just see them as cogs in the machine to further this end. So it's conducive to vice. It's fertile ground to vice. And imagine if we had a system that was much more fertile ground for virtuous behavior, or just like, what if it was like more advantageous to fix potholes on our streets, or fix the park, or care for a neighbor who needs help? What if there's a lot of work to be done, but we don't have a mutualistically inspired economy to actually get that work done? It's the bottom line is the most important thing, and we need to make the bottom line, I think, people. And again, it's not to say that mutualism is the only way or is the way, but it's such a refreshing idea for how to think about our economy that I'm very inspired by. Another idea I'll share here, so I didn't preamble this, but I guess what this first vlog is I'm just sharing some of these ideas that I hope to explore on this platform, Undetermined States of America. And I also am going to be organizing live events eventually, where after we talk about these ideas with experts or visionaries or artists, we're going to actually practice deliberation, because I do think the core switch in our country needs to be from an electoral democracy, like we just elect people to do things for us, where citizens, actually need to deliberate themselves. Or we need to, at the very least, require our politicians to be deliberating. I personally am in favor of moving to a lautocratic or sortition-based governance model, but that's something I want to determine, to think about with the founding citizens of Undetermined States of America. But these future live events will feature a discussion with an expert, and then you'll actually get to deliberate with your fellow founding citizens at this event to practice the kind of deliberation our country needs, because we're building culture, so that by attending a Undetermined States of America event, you are actually helping affect change at a small grassroots level, because we're helping build the kind of culture that our country needs, one of deliberation rather than consternation and just fighting. We need to actually find common ground for the common good. One last idea that I find very inspiring as an example of an idea that I'd like to explore on this is Robert Wright, who is an author that, full disclosure, I used to contract for, who has this idea of foreign policy called progressive realism. And foreign policy is how the United States and how nation states interact with other nation entities, foreign entities. And our foreign policy currently is very war-like. It's very based on a Cold War conception of these powers that be, like, fighting and vying for power, and perhaps some of that will never go away, but dare I say, let's have a vision of a more fruitful foreign policy and interaction of nation states. And progressive realism, and I hope Bob doesn't see this because I'm probably going to butcher it a bit. Well, realism starts from the premise that nations are going to have their own interests, and they're going to fight and make policies that advance those interests. And so you can think of the international order as just rational agents that are nation states calculating what is best for them, and they're going to do what's best for them, and they're only going to really cooperate if it benefits them. And progressive realism accepts that, but it also asks to have more cognitive empathy in understanding where that person or nation state is coming from, in order that we have better policies that avoid conflicts. And an example of this, I don't want to open a whole bundle of worms here by getting into specifics, but how I understand it is, with the Russian invasion of Ukraine, totally unacceptable, not right. I'm all pro-Ukraine here. but there is examples of where Russia felt encroached upon by NATO, and it seemed to them that if they don't invade Ukraine now, and they want then NATO would expand a new Ukraine, and that would cause problems for Russia later on. So, in other words, the calculus that Russia went through to invade Ukraine, there's a line of reasoning there, and I still think Putin is a tyrant and a dictator in a certain sense. Absolutely, I'm not pro Putin or anything like that, but we didn't apply some kind of the U.S. made mistakes that led to that invasion, I believe, and we were rattling our sabers in such a way as to provoke that response. Again, does not excuse it, does not allow. That should not have happened. Should not be happening. But what progressive realism states is we need to have a more cognitive, empathetic of understanding of what other countries are doing, what they're trying to do, and what their interest might be from their perspective, so that we can have better progressive foreign policy, more cooperative ways of interacting with each other as nation states. Because, quite frankly, the kinds of challenges we're facing as a world, as an Earth, I think the two primary ones are nuclear war, rampant wealth inequality, and climate change, climate disaster, which is going to affect the poorest of the world far more than the wealthy. But nuclear war, climate change, and wealth inequality, I think, are the three biggest. We need to cooperate with each other, with the nations, to actually avoid climate catastrophe and nuclear war. The economic policies probably need to be more domestic, but we need to cooperate, and a progressive realist way of approaching that and understanding why countries might be hesitant to do something, and empathizing with that. I just think that it's inspiring. Americans don't really think of foreign policy as a way we can be progressive, but what should we be? How should we be engaging with other countries? I think another reason that we are feeling stuck right now in this transitional time in our country's history is because we don't really know or feel like we believe in our system of government as it stands on the world stage. So what we do is just go back to times when the USA was number one in our heads, and we're just doubling down on those. And I think we're kind of just seen as the world's asshole police officer, and we don't need to be like that. We can be an inspiring, collaborative, awesome supporter country without being assholes. And having refreshing foreign policy takes is key to that endeavor, I believe. So these are some ideas that I've been inspired by. I guess I'll start with one more because this is kind of a podcast recording. Interstitial revolution. There is this sociologist who unfortunately passed away. His name is Eric Olin Wright. He wrote wrote many books, but one that I'm referencing here is called Envisioning Real Utopias. And he talks about what are actual practical visions we can have for our society based on how society dynamics works. And he's a sociologist, so he studies how social change happens and social structures that facilitate or hinder social change from happening. And one of his ideas that inspires me greatly, and my friends can attest to this because I've talked about it often, is he analyzes, revolution. What do we mean when we say revolution? And he states that how we usually think of revolution is that there is one group in power that eventually there's high oligarchic plutocratic government, and then the proletariat or the working class overthrows that and takes it for itself and makes it for the people, etc. And you see examples of that in history. But he calls that only one form of revolution. He calls that form ruptural revolution, because the system that's being used, there's a rupture. There's like another group overtakes it in a way, and it usually starts and ends in violence. Um, but another form of revolution is what he calls interstitial revolution. An interstitial revolution is when you build out egalitarian institutions in the interstices or the cracks of capitalism, and those cultural petri dishes and hubs of egalitarianism eventually form a kind of grassroots network that outgrows the current system. An example of this, interestingly, is how capitalism came about. Bet you weren't expecting that. So, how before capitalism there was feudalism, and I'm not a historian, so I'm just giving a broad brushstroke understanding of my understanding of feudalism, but basically had kings and stuff, and vassals and lords. Then you had like peasants, like on Monty Python, picking up dirt and stuff. No offense to any peasant descendants out there. So, but then you had like merchants, and then there used to be like lords and peasants, and then merchants would start to sell their wares in like the marketplace. And I'm simplifying this, and I'm not a historian, but eventually merchants started amassing more economic and therefore political power with selling things on the marketplace. So feudalism gave rise to mercantilism. And then mercantilism evolved into what is now capitalism. And it's not to say that mercantilism is a more egalitarian way of doing business than lords and peasants are, or anything like feudalism is. However, it was a more efficient way to have the needs met of the population at the time. And right now, our population, a need is that we're extremely lonely and isolated, and we just shop at these big stores like Amazon or Walmart, and we just have completely decimated our sense of community and economy, and our economic efforts are like so saddeningly like separated from our personal interactions and the people we know in our neighborhoods. So, I mean, I'm idealizing it a bit, but I imagine there was a time when you went to work, you were friends with your coworkers, you'd hang out at a bar or pool hall after work, and you'd make friends, maybe meet your spouse, and there was like many ripe opportunities for community connection. But now we don't have that. One, the jobs are dwindling. AI is taking over a lot of jobs, and or will, and the work we have is like really not like dignified or meaningful. A lot of it's been mechanized or outsourced. Not that I think we should just bring it back necessarily. I don't know if factories are the way forward, but the point I'm making is our social life and our economic life can be more intimately tied, I believe. And so what I'm saying is that I think there is an interstitial need for a community-based economy that has cooperatives, mutual aid societies, more people, worker-centered businesses. Doesn't mean there can't be entrepreneurs still. We need people to come up with ideas and visionary ideas, but we need to work together on these ideas as a community, as a collective. I'm all for leadership and things like that. I'm inspired by anarchism. I still think there needs to be leadership and hierarchy, but hierarchy not in terms of who's more valuable or dignified, but just to chain of command to get things done. So anyways, my point being that interstitial revolution is that culture and business and where people do their work and live their lives can create systemic change in a more grassroots mycelial way. And I think we're ripe for an interstitial revolution that is community-based, like a nationwide network of these cooperatives or labor unions or mutual aid societies that create a mutualist sector. So that is a way that change can happen. And I think what we're doing here in the undetermined states of America is a form of interstitial revolution. We're trying to practice the culture that we'd like to see enacted on a national scale. Another word for this is called prefigurative politics, or you build the new in the shell of the old. You need to prefigure the kind of society and culture that you want to create. And as I've been stating, our government is outdated. It's Windows 1787. And I do think we have this enormous task ahead of us as Americans to lay the foundations, like to re-articulate what does the Declaration of Independence mean for us now? Like, what do we want to be free from? What do we need the freedom to do as Americans now? Because it feels like a hellscape a little bit. Nothing feels like it's working. People can't live dignified lives easily here. It's so freaking hard. I've been to Europe and other countries before, and I went to Japan. I had the privilege of going to Japan last fall, and granted, the countries aren't perfect, but it does seem like it's much easier for people to live dignified lives in those countries. And I'm not saying that we need to do exactly what they do. We need to do what Americans need to do in our own way. I think we are very community-based and common good focused, and we are still very entrepreneurial and visionary. But the cool and scary thing, the call to adventure here is we need to do that for our government. We need to re-articulate what it means, what the Declaration of Independence means for us today, as it was done in 1776. That's our like value statement as a country. Like, what are our core values? And I want to hear from Americans from all over the country, left, right, Republicans, country people, city folk. Everyone should have a say in what does it mean to be an American to you. What if the Declaration of Independence was written today? What would you want to be on it? And then talking about what sort of system of government instantiates those values. What system of governance, whether it's still electoral or autocratic or a combination of the above, actually brings those values out in a practical manner. And so Undetermined States of America is a platform to explore ideas like the ones I stated that to me are just so darn refreshing as little morsels of vision for how our country could go. And then it's also a deliberative incubator to interstitially practice, to prefigure that culture of Americans coming together as a community with their differences to actually talk through what their vision of the common good is and what our core values are as Americans. Undetermined States of America is meant to be a movement. It's starting small with these blogs, videos, and podcasts. I'm going to release all the videos both as a YouTube video as well as on Substack and as a podcast, so that if you don't want to be on YouTube too much, you can just listen to the audio of this. But eventually we're going to have live events, interviewing people, and then practicing deliberating. And then I'd like to eventually hit the road and go around the country, host these events, these town halls, and interview and talk to regular Dane Americans, everybody, all over the country, no matter your race, class, color, orientation. Let's hear from you. What does the Declaration of Independence mean to you today? Who or what do we need to actually be free from? And it doesn't mean we need to do so violently or give the middle finger. We just need to evolve and grow here. And like I said, I think we are a pioneering, visionary peoples. We're also very hardworking. And we need a new freaking system. This thing is not working. We all feel it in our bones. So starting out with a blog and podcast, live events are on their way soon. And then eventually having a national conversation around the country. And then the big vision, the big prize is eventually with these conversations and this movement and this platform that has collected and organized these conversations, these ideas that we have that we're exploring, such as mutualism, interstitial revolution, progressive realism, or lotocracy, and there's many others out there, that we can then start to assemble as founding citizens what a vision for our country can look like. And then that's the slogan of Undetermined States of America. So it's meant to be kind of a canvas country. We are, in a way, trying to build a new country, to interstitially grow a new country, and it starts small. That's why the slogan of Undetermined States of America is determinanda a populo e pro populo, to be determined by the people and for the people. That is already in our Declaration of Independence now and our Constitution now, and we just need to roll up our sleeves and do it. It's going to be tough. I don't want it to be physically violent, but there will be a lot of tough conversations, but I believe in us. I believe in us as Americans. I hope we believe in us as well. Our fracturedness has been planned, and it's being done to us, and it's to keep this corrupt, outdated system chugging along, because when something's outdated and it barely works, a lot of people profit from it, and we need to build something new. So Undetermined States of America is a vehicle for that, and we're going to do it together as founding citizens. And remember, it's to be determined by and for the people. Thank you all for joining. Please share this out with anyone if you think they might like it, and subscribe, sign up for the Substack, and please reach out if you have any ideas or questions. And keep your eye out soon for a live event in New York, most likely in Brooklyn, hopefully sometime in March, if not early April, but definitely one of those 2 months. And have a good one, friends.